I told my son that his father had just passed away. His response: "It's Rachel's birthday. Can we talk tomorrow?" That was the moment it hit me. I hadn't just lost a husband. I'd lost my son too. He didn't show up to the funeral. But 3 weeks later he received a letter from my lawyer. He opened it and I saw the way he froze. What I did he'll never forget. And I never said a single word. Walter died right at the kitchen table mid-laugh, halfway through a joke about me buying the wrong kind of cream again. "If this powdered stuff kills me," he said with a chuckle, tapping his spoon on the mug, "you'll finally know real guilt." Then his hand twitched. The spoon slipped. And suddenly his face shifted. His eyes went wide like he couldn't remember how to breathe. I dropped the butter knife and lunged toward him, screaming his name, but it was already too late. His body slumped before I could even reach for the phone. Before my knees hit the tile, I knew. I wanted to believe maybe it was one of his awful jokes. But it wasn't. The 911 operator stayed calm while my world cracked wide open. I kept whispering his name as they talked me through compressions, but I already knew he was gone. His head had fallen to one side. His fingers, already cold, didn't curl around mine when I tried to hold them. When the paramedics arrived, I stepped back, numb. I heard words like massive, unrecoverable, and dinner, and I just nodded like I was hearing them in a dream. The house felt too loud and too quiet all at once. I ended up sitting on the edge of the couch, staring at nothing. After they covered him, after they told me it was over, I reached for my phone and called Jason, my only son. It rang 5 times. When he finally answered, I was barely holding it together. I told him, "Jason, it's your dad." He collapsed. "He's gone." There was a pause. Then in a flat, distracted tone he said, "Oh, Mom, today's Rachel's birthday. Can I call you later?" I couldn't even process what he said. I thought maybe I'd imagined it. But then he added, "She planned a whole brunch. We've got people over." I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just went quiet. My hand lowered the phone and I hung up. I didn't want to hear another word that would shatter me more than I already was. The air buzzed around me like a pressure wave in my ears. I looked over at Walter's chair, the one he always used for breakfast, late-night crossword puzzles, the one where he was still sitting. I sat next to him and held his hand for what felt like an hour, as if somehow that might bring him back. At some point the coroner arrived. They asked if I wanted a moment. I said no. The moment I needed had already passed. I went upstairs, locked the bedroom door and lay down on our bed without changing a thing. His phone was on the nightstand. I picked it up, praying there'd be something, anything, and there was. One missed call to Jason at 10:42 p.m. the night before. No voicemail. No answer. Walter had tried. Maybe he felt something was coming. And Jason hadn't picked up. I held that phone to my chest and felt the weight of 42 years. Of building a life, a home, a family. Walter worked every single day to make sure we never went without. And the silence from our son felt louder than any eulogy. The day of the funeral felt surreal. Like I was moving through a world that didn't quite sync with mine. I stood by the casket, gripping the podium to steady myself, while people I hadn't seen in decades whispered condolences. "He was such a good man. We're so sorry." But all I could think was, Jason wasn't there. He wasn't in the pews. He wasn't beside me. He wasn't even in the parking lot. I'd called the night before to confirm the funeral time. Rachel answered. She said Jason was still thinking about it, because they'd booked a weekend trip and the cancellation fees were too high this close to the date. I just stared at the phone while she rambled on about her birthday and her mental health. I didn't respond. I just hung up. I wasn't going to beg anyone, especially not for Walter's funeral. Walter, who stayed up all night with a colicky baby Jason, who spent his weekends building Lego cities, who made sure Jason could balance a checkbook by 12. And he called Jason the night before he died, and never heard back. Of course people noticed. The whispers started even before the service began. "Where's Jason? Did he miss his flight? Is Rachel all right?" Like they were the ones who needed our concern. Even Walter's old college buddy Mike leaned in and said, "I figured your boy would be front row today." I nodded like it didn't rip me in half. But the worst moment came afterward, by the coffee table in the fellowship hall, when Walter's coworker Tom came over. He said, "I don't mean to pry, but Walter mentioned helping Jason financially last month. He seemed really stressed." That stopped me cold. Walter never told me anything like that. We had no secrets, or so I thought. I didn't ask Tom to explain. I just thanked him for coming and excused myself to the bathroom. I sat there on the toilet lid staring at the floor until someone knocked asking if I was okay. I wasn't. My son skipped his father's funeral for a brunch and a getaway. And now I was hearing hints of secrets. Money, stress, things I never knew. When I got home that night, the silence in the house was unbearable. I poured a glass of wine, sat in the living room and tried not to cry. Then I checked my phone, and there it was. A photo Rachel had posted on Instagram, her in a bright pink dress, holding a mimosa, captioned "Best birthday ever. Love my hubby." Posted during the funeral. During the eulogy. I stared at it until the image blurred and my hands started to tremble. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept reaching across the bed for Walter's hand out of habit, only to find cold, empty space. Around 3 a.m. I got up. I went to Walter's desk and started pulling out papers. Bank statements, insurance records, old receipts. Anything that might explain what Tom had said. Because suddenly it wasn't just grief anymore. It was something colder. A feeling that maybe I didn't know everything about my own family. And the only person who could have told me the truth, Walter, was gone. The next morning I didn't wake up out of curiosity. I woke up with a purpose. And it wasn't gentle. It was sharp. It was rage dressed as mourning. So I went straight to Walter's old filing cabinet. The one he always kept locked but insisted I had the spare key to. And I did. It was taped to the back of our wedding photo in the closet, like some sweet symbol of trust that in that moment felt more like a quiet challenge. I unlocked the drawer and started sifting through neat rows of folders, decades of tax returns, retirement paperwork, bank statements, each labeled by month and year, as if Walter had expected to live forever, not die mid-sentence over a joke in a coffee mug. It didn't take long to find it. A slim blue folder marked Jason Transfers. My hands were already shaking as I sat down and flipped it open, feeling the rush of something bitter rise up in my chest. Page after page of quiet betrayal. Regular wire transfers from Walter's account to Jason's. $2,000 here, $3,500 there. And then one that froze my hands completely. $12,000 marked urgent. Rachel Medical. I stared at that number hoping maybe if I blinked it would disappear. But it didn't. There were 15 transfers in just the last 18 months. 15. And I'd had no idea. Walter never mentioned a word. We weren't the kind of couple who kept secrets. That was something we promised each other the day we merged accounts and picked out Jason's crib together. I kept going hoping something, anything, would help it all make sense. That's when I found it. Folded between the last few statements was a yellow piece of legal pad paper, the kind Walter always kept stacked on his desk. It was a letter. Not to me, to Jason. It read, "This is the second time you've told your mother one thing and done another. I've stayed quiet because I wanted to believe you, but if you lie about Rachel's expenses again, or if I find out you're using this money for anything else, I'll have no choice but to cut you off entirely. I love you, but I won't let you abuse your mother's trust." No signature, but I knew that handwriting better than my own. It was Walter's. And he never sent it. The date? Just 2 weeks before he died. I sat there, clutching the letter, the edges crumpling in my trembling fingers. And all I could think about was the way Jason sounded when I told him his father had died. Cold, distracted, like I'd asked him to cancel a lunch, not told him his father was gone. I couldn't cry. I couldn't even speak. I just sat frozen, realizing the man I loved had spent the last months of his life quietly fighting off our son's lies, trying to protect me from them, and now that man was gone. And Jason, the one who hadn't shown up to the funeral, had taken thousands and pretended like nothing was wrong. I put the folder back in the drawer, relocked it, and returned the key to its hiding place behind the photo. Not out of sentiment, but because I needed time to think. Not just about the money or the lies, but about what kind of man my son had become. And whether I had the strength to do what Walter couldn't. Later I sat at the kitchen table, yes, the same one where Walter had died just 5 days earlier, and stared at the same unwashed coffee mug still sitting in the sink. I didn't know what my next move would be. But I did know one thing. I was done pretending everything was okay. Then 5 days after the funeral, Jason showed up. Just showed up. Like walking through the door on a random Wednesday could undo what he'd skipped. As if grief had a window and he was still within the grace period. But when I opened the door and saw him standing there, hands buried deep in his jacket pockets, eyes clouded with something hollow, I didn't feel relief. I felt calculation. Rachel sat waiting in the car at the curb, engine running like she was ready to drive off the second things got uncomfortable. That alone told me more than any apology could. He said, "Mom," and I stepped back to let him in without a word. We went into the living room. Walter's chair sat in its usual place, untouched like a memorial nobody had planned. I offered Jason a cup of coffee out of habit. He said no, twitching on the edge of the couch like he was waiting for the next commercial break to make his exit. When he finally spoke, it was with this rehearsed politeness. "Rachel thinks I should have come sooner, and she's probably right." And I almost laughed. Of course she told him to come. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't love. It was PR. A clean-up job. I nodded slowly and sat across from him. My phone was already recording in the pocket of my cardigan. I didn't trust my memory, not with everything I'd found in Walter's drawer. And I definitely didn't trust Jason not to twist things later. "Did you know your father tried calling you the night before he died?" I asked, keeping my eyes on him. He flinched just slightly, a twitch in his jaw, then shrugged. "My phone was on silent," he said. "We were out. Rachel planned this surprise thing." And he trailed off like he realized how stupid it sounded mid-sentence. I let the silence grow heavy and sharp, until he started scrambling to fill it with weak excuses. I meant to call him back, I really did. But I didn't know it was serious. He didn't say anything about being sick. And neither did you. Kept my face blank. I didn't want him to see just how deep that one line cut. He started trying to shift the blame onto me, like somehow it was my fault he hadn't come to the funeral. Like Walter's death was just a scheduling mix-up we were all partially responsible for. "He wasn't sick, Jason," I said flatly. "He had a heart attack right at the breakfast table." 5 minutes after joking about the coffee creamer. Jason looked away, rubbing his forehead like even having this conversation was some kind of burden. Like I was the one making it worse by not letting things slide. I leaned forward, keeping my voice steady. "I found the transfers." And that was it. His whole body tensed like I'd lit a match in a room full of gas. "What transfers?" He shot back too quickly, too loud to be innocent. I didn't sugarcoat it. "The ones from Dad's account to yours. Rachel's medical bills, your vacation, the rent shortfall." "Don't lie to me, Jason." "Not now." And instead of shame, he looked insulted. "Those were loans, Mom. We were just going through a rough time. Dad offered." That's when I handed him the folded yellow note, Walter's letter he never sent. The one where he told Jason if he lied again the money would stop. Jason read it in silence, then calmly folded it back up, like it wasn't the clearest proof of the man he'd become. "He didn't mean that," he said softly. And right then I realized I wasn't talking to my son anymore. Not the boy who fell asleep on Walter's chest during Sunday football. Not the teenager who helped build the backyard shed. This man sitting on my couch was someone who had learned how to justify his betrayal, to make it feel rational. And in that moment I didn't feel heartbreak. I felt a cold, razor-sharp clarity. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a pattern. He had chosen again and again his own comfort over the people who raised him. And now he was here not because he felt guilt, but because Rachel told him to patch things up. I stood, walked to the front door and said simply, "I'll let you know if I need anything from you." He hesitated like he had more to say. But Rachel honked from the driveway and just like that he nodded and left. No hug, no, "How are you, Mom?" I watched him walk back to the car. I watched Rachel glance back at the house with this smug little smile like she thought they'd won something. And all I could think was, you have no idea what's coming. The next morning I woke up calm. Not peaceful, just decided. I didn't even make coffee before calling Martin Hayes, the attorney who had handled Walter's business affairs for decades. The same man who never missed sending a birthday card. I told him I needed to revise my will immediately. He didn't ask why. He just booked me for the next day. I spent the afternoon gathering everything. Bank records, the file of Jason's transfers, Walter's unsent letter, and the audio recording from Jason's pathetic visit the day before. Then I added one last thing. A handwritten letter to our granddaughter Lily, to be opened on her 18th birthday. Because no matter how her mother tried to spin the truth, or how quiet Jason tried to be, that little girl deserved facts. Not stories, not guilt, not silence. When I walked into Martin's office, he took one look at me and said, "I'm guessing this is more than just estate planning." I nodded, passed him the documents and said, "Everything goes into a trust. Every account. The house. Walter's stocks. The annuity. Everything. Then I added, but not for Jason. And not for Rachel. Not a single cent. Martin didn't even blink, he just picked up his legal pad and started writing. We structured it all so that Lily would inherit everything, but only when she turned 25. Early access would be allowed only for education and housing. No fast cars, no guilt-fueled teenage bribes. I also asked Martin to include a clause. If Jason or Rachel ever tried to contest the will, Lily would get full control immediately, and they would forfeit all rights, including visitation during the trust period. Harsh. Maybe. But when a son picks brunch over his father's funeral and his wife picks manipulation over mourning, you stop worrying about what's polite and start protecting what's left. Martin reviewed the entire document twice. He added the section with the sealed letter for Lily, and a transcript from Jason's visit that outlined the lies, the money, and the emotional abandonment. Then he looked me in the eye and said, "This is airtight, Diane. No weak spots. But it's going to hit him hard." And I said, "That's the point, Martin. It's supposed to." The final version was notarized and filed within the hour. I walked out of that office not feeling like I'd won anything, but like I'd drawn a line Walter never could. A line that should have been there years ago. This wasn't about revenge. It was reality. If Jason wanted to treat his parents like a never-ending ATM, he was about to learn that even ATMs have a shutdown sequence. And Walter, God rest him, had left a trail. A quiet, meticulous record. All I had to do was pull the plug. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of wine and read over the letter I'd written to Lily. 6 pages of truth. Not bitterness, just clarity. I told her who her grandfather really was. How much he gave. What he sacrificed. And how that generosity had been twisted by people he loved most into leverage and lies. And I told her the money she'd receive someday? It wasn't a gift. It was a legacy Walter built and I protected. It wasn't just money, it was a responsibility. A message. A reminder to choose love over convenience, loyalty over image, and courage over complacency. Lily was the only one in our family who still had a real chance to get it right. When I sealed that envelope, I didn't feel grief. I felt release. The kind that comes after years of staying quiet while people you love slowly betray you, so slowly that you stop realizing it's betrayal at all. Until one day you're standing alone at a funeral with no one beside you. But now, finally, I'd made sure that silence wouldn't be passed down to the next generation. 4 days after I left Martin's office, the letter landed in Jason's mailbox. Sent by certified mail, signature required. The confirmation slip hit my inbox at exactly 11:13 a.m., and I pictured him standing in his kitchen, flipping through his usual stack of bills, stopping cold when he spotted the law firm's seal on the corner of the envelope. I knew the exact moment he read it, because he didn't call, didn't text, didn't email. Not that day. Not the next. But Rachel did. She didn't send a message. She launched a barrage of texts, each one more frantic than the last. It started passive-aggressive. "Wow. Classy, Diane," and quickly turned venomous. "You're unbelievable. Do you even care about Lily?" I said nothing. Because silence was the most honest answer I could give them. On the 3rd day I finally answered. It was Jason. He called from a blocked number like that would somehow shield him from the weight of what he'd done. His voice was low, hesitant, almost tender. Like he thought using the same tone he used as a scared 6-year-old might bring back the version of me who would forgive anything. He opened with, "Mom, I just got the letter." As if I didn't already know. As if the last 72 hours hadn't echoed with everything he hadn't said. I didn't respond. I let the silence do the talking. Then he asked, "Is this real?" And I answered, "You tell me," because there was nothing left to explain. The pause that followed dragged out heavy and thick before he finally said, "I didn't know Dad felt that way." And I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I snapped quietly, coldly. "You didn't know, Jason, because you never asked. You were too busy pretending we didn't matter." That's when Rachel picked up on the other line. Her voice sharp, entitled. "You can't actually disinherit your own son. That's insane." And I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was exactly the kind of line she would say. The kind that made it clear she hadn't even considered what she'd done wrong. Only what she might lose. "I didn't disinherit him," I said. "I protected Lily." Rachel scoffed. "From us. Like the very idea of her being a threat was beyond comprehension. From this phone call. From this entitlement. From this exact moment. And before she could twist it into another performance, I hung up. That was the line. That was the boundary. Because no, you don't get to neglect us and then demand access. You don't get to opt out of grief and then claim an inheritance. You don't get to erase Walter's funeral and then rewrite his will. I sat back down at the same kitchen table where Walter's heart gave out, and for the first time since that morning, I felt something close to stillness. Not peace. Not closure. But control. Like I had finally done what Walter had never quite been able to bring himself to do. Draw a line that couldn't be crossed. Later that night I got one last text from Jason. It said, "I don't know how we come back from this." And I didn't answer. Because that's not my answer to give anymore. It's Lily's. And one day when she's old enough to know the truth, the full truth, she'll decide who's earned a place in her life. That's the legacy I'm leaving her. They showed up on a Sunday afternoon. No warning. Just pulled into my driveway like they were dropping in for coffee. Rachel stepped out of the car first, heels too high for gravel and a look in her eyes that said she was ready for war. Jason followed behind, unsure whether he was there to support her or just keep her from going too far. And before I could even say hello, she launched in. No greeting. No question. Just accusations. "You're manipulating this family through legal threats," she snapped, voice sharp and rehearsed like she'd practiced in the mirror for days. I stood in the doorway silent. I didn't move. I didn't invite them in. I just let her words hang between us like smoke. Then she added, "You're punishing us for setting boundaries." That's when I saw it, that smug tilt of her chin, like somehow she still believed she held the moral high ground. Even after skipping Walter's funeral. Even after draining our accounts through Jason. Even after painting herself as a victim in a story she wrote. I said nothing. I stepped aside just enough for them to walk in, not for their sake but because I knew Lily was upstairs. Listening. Half hearing every word the way kids do. And I needed her to hear this. Not to hurt her but to arm her. With truth. Rachel strutted into the living room like she owned the place, perfume trailing behind her. Jason sat quietly, avoiding eye contact. She crossed her arms. Took center stage. "We spoke to a lawyer," she said. "If you don't revise that will, we might have grounds to challenge it. Maybe even question your capacity." And that was it. I looked her straight in the eye and said, "Are you threatening to declare me mentally unfit?" He shrugged. "I'm just saying, it's not unheard of. Grief does strange things to people." I saw Jason flinch when I said that. Whether it was guilt or shame I couldn't quite tell. But then I heard the faint creak of the upstairs hallway floor. Lily shifting her weight as she listened. And I knew, every word being spoken was sinking into the one person in this family who still had a chance to see the truth clearly. I turned to Jason and asked, "Do you agree with her?" He didn't say anything. Just swallowed and looked away. And that silence, God, that silence, was louder than anything Rachel had said. Told me everything I needed to know. He wouldn't stop her. He wouldn't stand up to her. He wouldn't defend me or even his father's memory. Not if it meant rocking the boat at home. Rachel took his silence as permission. She stepped forward and said, "You're tearing this family apart over money." And I laughed. Not mockingly, just a small dry laugh. The kind you let out when something is so absurd it crosses into tragedy. "I'm tearing it apart?" I said. "Walter died alone. His son didn't even show up. And you're worried about the inheritance." That's when Lily appeared on the stairs, halfway down, her eyes wide but steady. Rachel turned, startled, but Lily didn't say a word. She looked at her father, then at me, and slowly turned back around and walked upstairs again. The air in the room shifted, thick with something unsaid. And for the first time Rachel's mask cracked. Her voice faltered. "She doesn't understand." But I said, "She understands more than you think." Then I opened the front door wide and uninviting and said, "We're done here." Jason stood and left without a word. Rachel hesitated as if debating one last jab, but she didn't say anything. Her heels clacked against the tile as she followed him out, and I shut the door behind them before her final step hit the porch. 3 weeks after that confrontation I found it. A small black flash drive inside an unmarked envelope, tucked carefully into my mailbox. No note, no explanation, Just my name written in Lily's careful 12-year-old handwriting. And the moment I saw it, my stomach dropped. This wasn't a drawing or a silly recording. It wasn't innocent. It was something serious. When I plugged it into my laptop, I sat in silence as folder after folder opened up in front of me. Each was labeled by date. Each held a piece of a world I hadn't been allowed to see. Audio recordings of phone calls. Screenshots of text messages. Even videos, shaky, grainy, from behind Lily's bedroom door. But clear enough to catch every word Rachel and Jason thought they were saying in private. In one recording, Rachel's voice was sharp, fast. She's manipulating everyone with that will. If Lily sides with her, I swear to God, Jason, we'll pull her out of that school and homeschool her until she gets her head on straight. In another, Jason's voice was lower but somehow worse. Just let Mom play her game. We're not depending on the money right now anyway. If Lily plays along, she can still help us later. I froze. Listening to my son talk about my estate like it was a negotiation, a long game, like I was already gone, just a pawn on his board. But the worst came from a video labeled Kitchen Night. Rachel was by the sink, whispering into her phone, "If we push just a little harder, she'll break. We'll say she's confused. Maybe get the lawyer to question her state of mind," and boom. The trust gets flagged. Then I heard Lily's breath catch, and the recording cut off. I didn't know what hit me harder, Rachel's cruelty or the fact that my granddaughter had been protecting me the whole time, while I thought I was protecting her. At the bottom of the folders was a single text document. Just a few lines. But it felt like a punch to the chest. "Grandma, I didn't know who else to tell. I hear things when they think I'm asleep. I know they're lying. I believe you. I'm saving this in case you ever need help." I stared at those words longer than I had stared at anything since Walter's letter. And I realized right then, the legacy I thought I was building wasn't about money, or trusts, or legal revenge. It was about her. About Lily. A 12-year-old girl in a house where the truth was treated like poison, gathering evidence in secret because no one else would stand up for the only adult who hadn't failed her yet. I backed up the drive twice. One copy went straight to Martin. The other locked away in my home safe. Then I wrote a new letter to Lily, sealed and dated, to be opened if anything ever happened to me before she turned 18. I needed her to know, I didn't just believe her. I trusted her. And if she ever had to stand in front of a judge, a teacher, a school counselor, anyone who dared question her sanity, she'd have proof. That she saw what she saw. And never looked away. That night I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat in Walter's old chair, holding that tiny flash drive in my hand like it was both a grenade and a gift. And I made myself a promise, not just to protect Lily's inheritance, but to protect her voice. Because in this broken family she was the first one brave enough to use it. The mediation was scheduled in a bland office downtown. Beige walls. Polite furniture. Bottled water on the table. One of those sterile spaces designed to make everyone feel calm, even though we all knew we were walking in to go to war. When Jason and Rachel walked into the mediation room, she looked like she was auditioning for a courtroom drama, every detail polished to perform. Jason, on the other hand, looked 10 years older than he had a month ago. Drawn, tired, shrunken. I didn't greet them. Didn't smile. Just sat beside Martin Hayes with the folder in front of me, Lily's flash drive, the bank transfers, Walter's unsent letter, and the transcript from Jason's recorded visit, all lined up like a quiet wall of truth wrapped in paper. The mediator introduced herself, speaking in a warm, practiced tone, and asked us to explain why we were there. Rachel jumped in immediately, painting me as emotionally unstable and vengeful, grief-stricken, and perhaps no longer fully rational. She spun her story like a monologue she'd rehearsed 100 times. Jason sat beside her, silent, eyes darting away every time I looked at him. When it was my turn, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't falter. I simply slid the folder across the table and said, "This is why." The mediator flipped through page after page. Dated wire transfers, handwritten notes, a log of the audio files, and at the bottom the flash drive with one word printed on the label: evidence. And then the shift happened, the moment you feel a room crack wide open. The mediator looked up, turned to Rachel and asked plainly, "Were you aware that your daughter recorded statements regarding attempts to manipulate a legal trust?" Rachel's face drained of all color. She stammered, "She's 12. She doesn't understand context." But it was too late. The evidence spoke louder than any denial. The mask slipped fast. The mediator turned to Jason and asked if he'd like to speak. He didn't. He just rubbed his hands together like he was trying to scrub away guilt. I said softly, "She tried to warn you." That's when Rachel lost control. Not with defense but with rage. She slammed her hand on the table and shouted, "This is all because you couldn't deal with Walter dying. You're doing this because you're lonely and angry." The mediator calmly asked her to step outside and collect herself. She stormed out, heels clapping against the tile, and left Jason sitting there alone. And finally, for the first time since Walter's funeral, Jason looked at me and spoke. "I didn't know it had gotten that bad," he said, his voice quiet and frayed. And I replied, "You didn't want to know." He nodded, staring at the floor. "I just wanted peace." "You don't get peace from silence," I told him. "You get it by standing up when it matters." When the mediator returned, she informed us the trust was untouchable, legally sound, morally justified, and supported by overwhelming documentation. Lily's recordings were recognized as evidence of undue pressure in the household. Rachel didn't come back. Not even to hear the outcome. Jason left quietly, no handshake, no goodbye. I remained seated a few moments longer, gathering my things. And what I felt wasn't triumph or relief. It was a still, heavy sorrow. The kind that comes when the battle ends. Not because you won, but because the truth made it impossible for anyone to keep lying. Lily turned 18 last Friday. There were no balloons, no cake. Just a soft knock on my door around noon. Her eyes were wide but steady as she stepped inside and handed me the letter I'd written to her 5 years earlier, still sealed. She said, "I want to read it with you." I didn't speak. Just nodded and watched her carefully open the envelope, unfolding the 6 pages I'd written when everything was crumbling. She read silently for a long time, her expression shifting from calm to tears. At one point she paused and asked, "Is all of this still true?" I said, "Every word." She hugged me tighter than she ever had and whispered, "Thank you for telling me the truth, when no one else would." I felt the full weight of pain and purpose in that embrace. Later we sat together in Walter's old chair and she pulled out her phone. "I want to show you something," she said. It was a short video of her standing in front of a judge at a name change hearing. She said clearly, "I'd like to change my middle name to Diane. After my grandmother." That broke me. I couldn't hold back the tears. Not at the sound of her words, but the meaning behind them. That she'd chosen a part of this family that hadn't failed her. Hadn't lied to her. Hadn't treated her like a bargaining chip. That afternoon we went to her graduation ceremony. And as she walked across the stage they called out her full name, Lily Diane Whitfield. She turned and looked right at me. And she smiled. Not just with pride. But with clarity. The kind of clarity Walter used to wear when he made the hard calls. The ones nobody else understood until it was far too late. Jason was there too. Sitting alone in the back row. His eyes were red. His suit was wrinkled. He clapped, but not with joy. More like obligation. And he didn't come over afterward. Not to me. Not to Lily. Not because he wasn't welcome, but because I think Jason finally understood what it really meant to be cut off. Deeper than money, beyond legal documents. That kind of silence. The kind that echoes where connection used to live. After the ceremony, Lily ran straight to me. She wrapped her arms around me and whispered with that same excited glint in her eyes, "My roommate backed out for next semester, and I told the housing office I want to live with you." I laughed through tears, overwhelmed by the gift she didn't even realize she was giving me. Another year of her stories, her playlists drifting down the hallway, her toothbrush resting in my bathroom like it belonged there. Like she belonged. It felt like a quiet win against everything Rachel had tried to orchestrate. And we didn't mention Rachel at all that day. Not even once. Because by then she had faded into the background like a subplot that no longer mattered. Her absence spoke louder than any apology she never offered. That night I tucked Lily into her old childhood bed. Left the door slightly ajar just like I used to back when she was little and afraid of the dark. And as I pulled the blanket up over her, she looked up and said, "You gave me a life I didn't even know I needed." I kissed her forehead and whispered, "You chose it, sweetheart. I just cleared the path." Then I walked down the hall past Walter's photo, same spot on the wall it had always been, and I stopped, gently touching the frame. "She's going to be okay, love," I whispered. "We're going to be okay." And for the first time in years I actually believed it.